All right, my favorite quotes over the years, and it's funny what sticks with you, right? It's hilarious what sticks with you. Inane, unimportant things stick with you in 30 plus years of being on the air and being around radio people, those kind of people. But yeah, you work with a bunch of people, and sometimes they say things that stick, and sometimes I think back and these sayings pop up, and I just laugh to myself. And I'll start with the top 5 things that I remember over the years, and ascending or descending order. I'm not sure which one. I start with number 5, and we go down to number 1. And number 5 came from Phil Zachary, who was the general manager at WRDU for many, many years. And then he was over at 96 Rock, and I was over there for a while too, and both the Raleigh stations. And he would have meetings from time to time, and he was really good at having meetings. You'd sit there and you'd listen. Any general manager or program director that has meetings that you listen in is a good program instead of sleep through them, which most of us did almost all the time. But he had good meetings, and he was a great speaker, this Phil Zachary guy was. And he would say one time in a meeting, he said this, and we all just laughed because we knew who he was talking about. He said, look, when you go on the air, you kind of got to abstain from the word man because it gets laborious and it's just, and I always think of that because I was the one that did that. I would always use man. Wow, man, that was good. And New Zeppelin, man, and all that kind of stuff. And it did get laborious, but I always remember that. The use of the word man on the air is laborious. Number 5. Number 4 comes from my old buddy Dutch Hawk, who was with us at WRDU, and he moved down to Wilmington for a couple of years. And he's a bitter man, and he's out of radio now, and he does a nice thing on his own. He does his own thing, which is this and that, which is what we all do, a little of this and a little of that. And quote number 4 out of all the quotes I'll remember of all time is this: fuck radio, I'll never do it again. So that's number 4. And number 3 comes from Tom Guild, who I worked with for many years too, different capacities. But this was when he was on the air and I wasn't. I was just getting ready to go to work at WQDR in Raleigh in 1983. And I was a big fan before I went to work there. And that's what's great about it. I got to enjoy both ends of it. But I heard him on the air one day in my Subaru Brat going down, Martin Street downtown, I think, and driving by the station. It was one afternoon at 5 o'clock, and he played Substitute by The Who. And he finished playing the song, and I was enjoying it. And he said this, and it stuck with me, and it always will. And I love it. He said, you just can't go wrong with The Who. And any quote books? I don't think so, but it stuck with me, and I love it. I love it, love it, love it. And I swear to you, I think of that every time I play The Who on my disc player or whatever, or even when I hear it. You just can't go wrong with The Who. After all these years, that one's still, Now let's move down to my number 2 quote, and it's and it came from Ben Ball, who was the program director, the first program director we had at WRDU when it opened up in 1984. And he was a good guy, nice person. And he was a fun guy to work for, and he had this walrus kind of mustache, and he's just a great person overall. And they hired me at WRDU after I'd been unemployed for a couple of months, and they paid me $17,000 a year to do the 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. shift. And I was happy as could be to get that. I was sleeping with friends, crashing on couches, on the beach, as they say. And so they said, yeah, we'll hire you. It was $17,000 a year, and I'll take it. And that was big money for me at the time. And then after about 8 or 9 months, 10 months or something like that, WRDU did really, really well in the beginning. And he came to me one day and he said, listen, we're going to give you a raise. And we're going to bump you up from 17 to 21,000 a year. 1984, I think this was. And then comes number 2 quote of all time that will always stick with me. We figured you needed it. But is there any better phrase to hear in radio than we're going to bump you up? And that's what you ask for when you go to ask for a raise that you won't get. It's like, I'm going to need a little bump. Bump is the word when it comes down to that. That's the number 2 quote of all time. We're going to raise you to 21,000 because we figured you needed it, said Ben Ball. And number 1 is this, and it's astounding, but it sticks with me. And the guy was a quotable. He had a quote for all time, and you'd always snicker and laugh at his quotes. I worked with him for many years, and there was a time when they were changing formats in the radio stations in the Raleigh-Durham market all the time. And they'd fire people, and then they'd come over, and we never fired anyone at WRDU, so they'd come over and they apply at WRDU. And Phil Zachary or Dave Barry, whoever the general manager was at the time, would come over to Bob Walton, who was kind of the operations manager and program director, and say, well, so-and-so applied, they want to have a job here. And Walton would say, yeah, any port in the storm, And we'd giggle and laugh. He just came up with them constantly. And I talked to them 5-6 years ago, and we talked about the good old days in radio where you could play what you wanted and it was a rock station. And they're not any more of those anymore. And he's, that ship has sailed, But my favorite quote of his was this, and I don't know why, but it's the one quote that has stuck with me through all of time. And at one point, somebody had brought a box, a 12-pack of Dunkin' Donuts by the radio station one day. And they brought him into his office, and we were kind of hanging around, and we were eating him, stuffing him down our mouth, and he was stuffing his 5th donut into his mouth. And he said, I love donuts. And why has that stuck with me? It's the greatest quote of all time for many of my radio cohorts. I love donuts. Damned if I don't love donuts myself. And I can eat 6 or 7 or 8 at a time, and I always do. And every time I eat even one donut, I think to myself, I love donuts. And I always think of that clown. Think how often you eat donuts. I think of that phrase every day. I have donuts every day. So that's it. That's the greatest quote of all time from all of my radio cohorts. God, I love donuts. And it was the way he said it. Now, next time, I want to thank all my patrons and sponsors of the Blade Radio Show, if you call it that. But next time, I'm going to talk about the greatest rock sayings of all time. Like, one of my favorites was this, don't talk in my rock, And then I've also got a show down the road here in a couple of weeks, which will be called The 5 Most Heinous Crimes of Rock Radio. Wait till you hear that one. You've probably got a couple in your mind already.